I stepped into the lobby of the Lakewood Country Club with a slow breath I hoped looked steady. Warm lights glowed across polished floors, the kind meant to make everything feel elegant and effortless. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the pressure of too many eyes turning toward me. It was my engagement party, mine and Michael's. Yet something in the air told me I was not the one everyone had been watching. Avery, my wedding planner, rushed toward me before I could even take off my coat. Her cheeks were flushed from running back and forth, and she lowered her voice as she reached me. Emily, please tell me you didn't request any last-minute changes. I shook my head and forced a smile because people were already glancing in our direction. No, nothing at all. Why? She hesitated and pulled out her phone. Someone emailed the venue this morning asking to switch the florist and cancel half the decor. It looked like it came from your address. My stomach twisted. This was the third time something like this had happened in the last 2 weeks. Each time I convinced myself it must be a misunderstanding. I kept reminding myself it was a big event and mistakes happen, but it was getting harder to believe that. I told Avery I never sent anything. Her eyes showed relief and worry at the same time before she hurried off again. I scanned the room, looking for Michael. Instead, I found Olivia. My younger sister stood near the fireplace, surrounded by a small crowd. Her dress caught the light like she had positioned herself in the one spot designed for a photo shoot. People laughed at every word she said. She always did know how to capture a room. Her eyes slid to me, sharp and assessing. Then she lifted her glass in a little gesture that could have passed as warm if I did not know the truth of it. She gave me that smile she always used when she wanted people to think she adored me. But her voice held a different tone when she walked over. Well, look who finally arrived. We were beginning to think you got cold feet. A few people chuckled politely. I forced myself not to react. Olivia thrived on reactions. She studied my dress, my hair, even my expression, searching for something she could use. You missed the fun, she added. There was a little mix-up earlier. Some decorator called saying you canceled the centerpieces. Quite a surprise. I looked directly at her, and she held her expression perfectly still. Almost too still. I said nothing, just moved past her toward the main gathering room. A familiar ache rose in my chest, the same one that always came when Olivia found a way to turn attention back onto herself at my expense. Tonight she seemed to be radiating with a kind of energy that made the room tilt toward her whether she intended it or not. Michael finally appeared from the opposite side of the room. His face softened when he saw me, and he brushed a hand along my arm as he leaned in. You all right? I told him about Avery's message. His jaw tightened only slightly before he smoothed his expression. We will sort that out later. Let's just get through the evening. There was something in his voice he was not ready to explain. Something he was holding for the right moment. Guests began drifting toward us, offering congratulations. I tried to settle into the rhythm of small talk, but whispers were already reaching me. Someone mentioned how strange it was that the seating chart had changed 3 times. Another person said they heard I had been clashing with the planner. None of it was true, but the tone suggested these rumors had been circulating long before I walked through the door. I caught Olivia's eye from across the room. She looked pleased. Michael noticed my distraction and placed a reassuring hand on my back. Ignore it for now. Focus on tonight. I nodded, but the unease grew stronger. This was supposed to be the night our families came together, a celebration of something good and steady. Instead, it felt like the ground under the event had been loosened, shifted just enough to make me wonder what else might crumble. I stopped near the refreshment table to take a breath. A pair of older relatives were quietly discussing the earlier confusion. They said things like poor Emily must be overwhelmed, or maybe she is not ready for this. Their voices carried just enough that I knew Olivia had said something before I arrived. She had always been able to plant a story before I even had the chance to speak for myself. A soft, familiar touch brushed my elbow. You need some air. Daniel, Olivia's husband, looked at me with concern. He had always been kind, more observant than my sister gave him credit for. I am all right, I said. He studied me a moment longer, then stepped back. Let me know if you need anything. He meant it, and that alone struck me as odd on a night when so many people seemed to be evaluating me without asking a single question. I moved toward the large window overlooking the golf course. Snow had begun to fall lightly, the kind that softened the landscape and quieted the world outside. I tried to let the view calm me, but my mind kept circling back to the emails, the strange changes, the small tensions around the room. Something had been unfolding beneath the surface for weeks, and tonight it was settling into place. A laugh rang out behind me, loud and bright. Olivia again. She was retelling something that had supposedly happened during the planning process, and people leaned in toward her, eating every word. I felt heat rise at the back of my neck. My engagement party was becoming her stage. Michael returned to my side. "There is something off," he whispered. It was the first time he had admitted it out loud. I turned to him, and he looked toward Olivia without hiding it anymore. "We just need to get through tonight. After that, everything will come to light." His words made something inside me still. Michael was not guessing. He knew something. Before I could ask, Avery hurried over again, her face pale. "Emily, someone tried to cancel the dessert delivery 20 minutes ago. The bakery almost called it off if I had not answered myself." I felt the room shift around me. Olivia's voice rose behind us, cheerful and polished, as if none of this touched her. Guests kept arriving and greeting her like she belonged at the center of every moment. Watching her, the truth pressed harder in my chest. Everything pointed in one direction. Michael touched my hand lightly. "Stay close to me tonight." His tone was gentle but firm, the kind he used when he was preparing for something unavoidable. I nodded. Even though confusion swirled in my head, I had the sense that he had been waiting for the right moment to act, that he was giving me time to see the edges of things before the rest of the picture was revealed. Across the room, Olivia lifted her glass again, as if acknowledging an applause only she could hear. The smile she wore did not waver, but for the first time I noticed a flicker behind it, a glint of something sharper, deeper, and far more deliberate. The evening had only begun, but I already felt the fault lines forming underneath us, quiet and certain, waiting for the right pressure to break open. I watched her glide through the room as if the entire night had been arranged around her, and for a moment I felt a familiar heaviness settle in my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get as a girl when she would sweep into a room and everyone, including our parents, seemed to shift their attention toward her without thinking. I had not expected that old ache to return tonight, not after so many years of creating distance and building a life of my own. Yet here it was again, rising in quiet waves. I turned away and moved along the edge of the crowd, hoping to find a calmer corner where I could breathe. Instead, I caught the end of a conversation between two of my aunts. They did not see me approach, so their voices drifted freely. One said she heard I had changed the seating arrangements 3 times and that the planner was close to walking out. The other sighed and said she hoped I was not pushing Michael too hard. I felt the sting of their words settle beneath my ribs. They were speaking with concern, but concern built on rumors that seemed to have spread before I even arrived. I wondered how far they had traveled and who had carried them. As I stepped closer, they finally noticed me and straightened with polite smiles. I forced one in return, not trusting my voice, and walked past without stopping. I could feel their eyes follow me, waiting to see if I would crack under the weight of their unspoken questions. The farther I moved, the more I became aware of subtle shifts in tone around me. A cousin I had always gotten along with offered congratulations, but with a hesitation in her eyes, as if she wanted to ask something but did not dare. Another relative who normally hugged me warmly simply patted my arm and drifted off before a conversation could begin. None of it was overtly cruel, but it was enough to unsettle me, enough to tell me that the night had been shaped long before I walked into it. I stopped near a cluster of framed photos Michael and I had placed on a decorative table. They were small pieces of our story, little moments of joy we wanted to share with our families. I touched one gently and tried to steady myself. This night was supposed to be about love and beginning something new. Instead, I felt surrounded by whispers from the past. My childhood drifted into my thoughts without invitation. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while Olivia put on little performances in the living room, singing into a wooden spoon or spinning in a new dress our mother had bought her. She always had an audience, always had a spotlight. I was the quiet one, the responsible one. The girl who did not need attention because she never complained. At least that was how my parents justified it. The older I grew, the more I understood that what they called independence was often a convenient excuse to ignore me. The memory faded when Michael appeared at my side again. He had a way of grounding me even when he did not say much. He brushed his fingers lightly against mine. "You holding up?" I nodded, even though the truth was more complicated. "I am fine," I said softly, just trying to understand what is going on. His eyes searched mine, steady and calm. "We will figure it out, I promise." Before I could respond, Olivia's voice rose behind us in one of her bright, practiced laughs. Guests nearby turned instinctively toward her. She was telling some story about how hectic the planning had been. Her tone sounded sympathetic, but the details were twisted just enough to suggest I had been difficult. I felt my jaw tighten. She looked so at ease, so confident, as if she were narrating my engagement through her own lens. Daniel approached her, and they exchanged a few words. Something passed over his expression that I could not read. He glanced in my direction, then back at Olivia, who tapped his arm dismissively before returning to her audience. He hesitated, then walked toward me instead. "You doing all right, Em?" He asked it gently, with genuine concern. I told him I was fine, though he did not look convinced. He lowered his voice slightly. "Earlier, Olivia said there were issues with the planner and that you were stressed. I just wanted to make sure you knew people are here to support you." The concern in his eyes was real, but behind it I saw confusion, maybe even doubt. Olivia must have been talking for days. "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone steady. There was nothing else to say without unraveling the whole night. He nodded and stepped away, leaving me with the uneasy truth that Olivia had shaped the narrative long before I arrived. Michael returned with 2 glasses of sparkling water. I took one gratefully. He stood close enough that our shoulders touched slightly. I could feel the tension in him, the quiet readiness, and I knew whatever he was holding back was no small thing. As the evening carried on, the room shifted again. Conversations grew louder and clusters of guests moved around. But beneath the noise, there was a subtle thread of discomfort. I recognized the way people kept glancing toward me as if trying to reconcile what they had heard with what they saw. I tried to smile, to greet people warmly, but every exchange left a trace of something uneasy in their eyes. I walked deeper into the hall, near the fireplace where a few relatives were warming themselves. They stopped talking when I approached, offering quick greetings before dispersing. I stood there alone for a moment, staring into the flicker of the flames. My reflection shivered faintly in the glass screen, and for a second I did not know how to interpret the expression on my own face. Determined or hurt, angry or exhausted, maybe all of it at once. I sensed movement and turned to see Olivia watching me from across the room. She lifted her chin in that subtle, familiar way, as though daring me to challenge her. Then she turned back to her circle of admirers, her voice rising once again in bright, polished confidence. I stepped away from the fire and found a quieter corner. A soft hum from the musicians floated through the air, and for a moment I let myself breathe deeply, trying to pull myself into the present. I reminded myself that this night was not about Olivia or rumors or chaos. It was about Michael and me. Yet the harder I tried to hold on to that truth, the more it slipped through my fingers. A group of Michael's co-workers approached with warm smiles. They congratulated us, shared stories about him, and asked about our wedding plans. Their kindness steadied me for a moment, and I could almost feel normal again. But as they walked away, I overheard one of them quietly mention how strange it was that the planner nearly quit earlier. The relief inside me tightened again. Another rumor traced back to the same invisible source. Michael returned to check on me, and I told him what I had heard. His expression darkened for a brief moment before he smoothed it over. "Stay close to me tonight," he said again. It felt less like a suggestion now and more like a quiet shield. I nodded and slipped my hand into his. He held it firmly as we moved back toward the center of the room where guests were gathering for speeches. The lights dimmed slightly, the musicians shifted to a softer melody, and the host invited everyone to take their seats. I looked around the room one more time. Olivia was settling into a chair near the front, perfectly positioned where everyone could see her. Her posture was graceful, her smile controlled, but her eyes flickered with something sharp. I had seen that look before in smaller moments when she needed attention or dominance. Tonight it seemed amplified. As I sat beside Michael, I felt the air shift again, charged with something that wanted to surface. The night had reached a fragile point, and though I could not name it yet, I sensed that whatever had been building was about to step out of the shadows. A low hush settled across the room as everyone shifted in their seats. And for a breath, the only sounds were the clink of glasses and the faint shuffling of programs being passed along the tables. I kept my eyes forward, trying to steady myself, but a pressure gathered beneath my ribs that I could not shake. It felt as if the walls of the room were leaning in, waiting. Avery appeared beside me with a stiffness in her posture that did not fit her usual calm. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "Emily, we need to talk once the speeches wrap up. There is something else." I turned toward her and she gave a tiny shake of her head, the kind that told me the timing was wrong for explanations. My pulse quickened. She stepped away just as the host called for attention. As the first speech began, my focus drifted. The words floated around me but did not land anywhere. I caught sight of Olivia in the front row. She sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression serene, almost saintly. Anyone watching her would think she was the most supportive sister in the world. But I saw something else flicker behind her eyes, a glint of anticipation that made my skin prickle. When the speech ended, a small ripple of applause passed through the guests. Before the next speaker could stand, Avery touched my arm again. "The contractor for lighting just called. Someone emailed him from your address asking to dim everything after the first dance." He was confused, so he reached out to me. I felt the room tilt slightly. This was not normal. This was not a mistake. Someone had gone out of their way to use my identity to create chaos. I whispered that I had not sent anything. Avery nodded firmly. "I believe you. I just want you to know what is happening." She hesitated, then added softly, "Every message traces back to your parents' house." My breath caught. Before I could respond, there was a small commotion near the side doors. Michael stepped forward from the crowd and motioned for me to follow him. He guided me into a side hallway, quiet and lit only by sconces. His jaw was tight, and he seemed to have rehearsed whatever he was about to say. "Emily, something is wrong on a level we cannot ignore anymore." He paused, searching my face. "I have been tracking those emails for 2 weeks. Every one of them comes from an address that looks like yours, but the signature patterns are off. And all of them were sent from your parents' network." I leaned back against the wall, feeling the cold seeping through the fabric of my dress. Michael reached out as if to steady me, but gave me space when he saw I needed it. "Who?" The word left me weakly. Who would do something like that? Michael did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his inner pocket and took out his phone. He opened an email and held it toward me. "See the timestamp, 9:14 in the morning, and see the phrasing." He pointed. "This is not how you write." He showed me another, and another, all similar, all wrong. Everything in me tightened. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing myself to breathe. When I opened them, Michael's expression had changed. He looked like someone who had already put the pieces together. "Emily, I need to ask you something. Has Olivia ever done anything like this before?" I stared at him, stunned that he would even consider saying her name in this moment. But the weight in his gaze told me he was not guessing anymore. He had seen something, or suspected something. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps. I turned and saw Olivia herself walking toward us. Her expression was bright and innocent. "There you are. People are asking where the happy couple went." She gave me a curious tilt of her head. "Everything all right?" I swallowed the words rising in my throat. Olivia's eyes flicked to Michael, then back to me. She stood close enough that I could smell her perfume, sweet and sharp. I felt an old instinct awaken in me, a need to fold into myself and keep the peace, but I held my ground. "We are fine," I said, though my voice felt thin. She studied me for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then smiled as if she had found a crack in a window she meant to pry open later. "You might want to get back in there," she said lightly. "People are starting to wonder what is going on." She walked away before either of us could respond. I watched her re-enter the room with the same poise she always carried, as if nothing touched her, as if she had not left behind a trail of questions she did not intend to answer. Michael exhaled slowly. "She is not even trying to hide it," he murmured. I looked at him sharply. "Do not jump to conclusions." His eyes softened. "I will not," he said quietly, "but I am not blind either." We returned to the main hall just as the host prepared to invite someone else to speak. The lights felt brighter now, the room louder, as if the air itself had thinned. Olivia turned toward us the moment we stepped inside. Her gaze swept over me, unreadable, then shifted to Michael, lingering a fraction too long. She lifted her champagne flute in a graceful arc and offered a smile that did not reach her eyes. The host began speaking again, but I barely heard a word. Avery slipped into the room from the service corridor. She gave me a subtle nod, signaling there was more she needed to tell me when she could get me alone. Ethan, Michael's friend, was watching Olivia from across the room with a furrowed brow, as if he too sensed something brewing beneath the surface. A sense of inevitability crept through me. It felt like the moment before a storm hits, when the wind holds its breath and everything becomes too still. Olivia shifted in her seat and crossed her legs slowly, a small, deliberate movement that reminded me of a curtain rising before an act. She glanced toward the microphone stand as if considering whether to step into the spotlight next. For a moment, I wondered if she would. I wondered if she was waiting for the perfect moment to make whatever she was planning impossible to ignore. The thought unsettled me enough that I leaned toward Michael. "We need to stay close," I said softly. He squeezed my hand once, a promise without words. Then the host called Olivia's name. She turned toward the crowd with the ease of someone who had been expecting it all along. As she rose from her seat, the air shifted again, tight and electric. I felt it gather in the center of the room, pulling every gaze toward her. She stepped up to the microphone with a serene smile, ready to begin whatever part she had written for herself. I did not know what she planned to say. I only knew that something was coming, and once she spoke, nothing about this night would stay the same. Olivia touched the microphone with a light tap that echoed faintly through the room. She offered a graceful smile, as if she had been invited to bless the evening. The crowd shifted, settling into a curious hush. I felt Michael straighten beside me, his attention locked on her. My pulse thudded a little too hard in my ears. She began with a soft laugh and thanked everyone for being there. It should have been harmless, a simple gesture of goodwill, but she spoke with a confidence that did not belong to the guest list. Her voice carried through the hall in that polished way she had mastered years ago, the way that made people lean closer even when they should have stepped back. I watched her closely. There was a brightness in her expression, but her eyes held something sharper. She paused just long enough to gather the room before she shifted her tone. She talked about how planning a wedding could bring out the best in people, and sometimes the worst, and how stress made some people unpredictable. A few guests murmured in sympathetic agreement. She let their reaction land before continuing, carefully threading her words into something that looked innocent on the surface yet felt pointed underneath. My mother, Linda, nodded along as if Olivia were reciting a universal truth. My father, Robert, looked uneasy but said nothing. He rarely interrupted a moment that looked polished from the outside. Then Olivia did what I feared. She wove in a story about how hard the last few weeks had been for Emily and how I had struggled to make decisions and stick with them. She mentioned venue changes that never happened and minor disagreements that she inflated into something dramatic. Her voice stayed warm, almost affectionate, as if she were protecting me instead of undermining me. I felt my chest tighten. Guests turned toward me with sympathetic smiles and one or two exchanged glances that suggested concern. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Olivia continued with a gentle sigh that carried a subtle accusation. She framed it as if she were being supportive of her overwhelmed older sister, and how grateful she was that Michael had stepped in to keep everything on track. Michael let out a quiet breath of disbelief. He looked ready to stand, but I touched his arm lightly. Not yet. We both knew there was a time for truth, and it was not this moment. As soon as Olivia stepped down, she received a wave of soft applause. She accepted it with a humble tilt of her head. Then she made her way directly to a cluster of our relatives. I could hear snippets of her voice floating above the crowd. She had switched to a softer register, the kind that invited confidences. She spoke just loudly enough that fragments of her words drifted toward us. Things have been difficult for her. She said something about canceling details earlier, but I do not think she meant to cause trouble. She gets overwhelmed. She tries so hard. One of my older cousins leaned closer to Olivia, nodding. Another aunt gently patted Olivia's hand, as if she were the one who needed comfort. I felt my stomach turn. It was an old pattern, Olivia positioning herself as the steady, forgiving sibling and me as the fragile, disorganized one. A version of our family history, rewritten so many times that even the people who witnessed the truth began to forget it. I stepped farther from the crowd and took a deep breath near the long windows. Snow was falling harder now. Each flake drifted past the glass like tiny sparks of light. I pressed my hand lightly against the cool surface, trying to steady myself. I had spent years learning how to keep my footing around Olivia. Tonight she had slipped into an old role so effortlessly that I felt myself pulled into a tide I thought I had outgrown. Michael joined me again, glancing toward Olivia with narrowed eyes. She is creating a narrative. He spoke quietly, without judgment. I nodded. I could feel the shape of her story forming around me like a net tightening with each whisper. We should not let this continue. His voice was low but firm. There was a controlled tension in him, not anger but something resolute. I knew he was building toward something. Before I could respond, a small group of relatives approached. They congratulated us again, though with a stiffness I had not seen earlier. One gently asked if I needed help with the planner. Another mentioned hearing that I had changed the floral arrangements twice. Their questions were framed as kindness, but their tone carried doubts planted by someone else. I answered calmly, refusing to give Olivia's lies room to grow, but my voice trembled at the edges. After they walked away, I saw Olivia watching us. She looked serene, content, as if everything was unfolding exactly as she imagined. A moment later, I caught sight of Daniel near the refreshment table. He looked unsettled and glanced between Olivia and me with an expression I had never seen on him. He finally approached hesitantly. I need to ask something. His voice was almost apologetic. Did you really change things last minute? Olivia has been saying you were under a lot of stress. He did not sound accusatory. He sounded confused, torn between two versions of the truth. I met his eyes and said calmly that I had not changed anything and had no idea why Olivia was telling people otherwise. Something in his expression shifted. He looked toward his wife with a mixture of worry and disbelief. Before he could say more, Olivia appeared beside him and looped her arm through his. Her smile was radiant, almost too radiant, and her eyes flickered with annoyance when she glanced at me. She guided Daniel back toward the group she had been entertaining. I watched them go, feeling a new kind of clarity forming beneath the ache. Whatever she was building tonight, she was doing it with intention. As the room began to transition toward the next stage of the evening, a soft murmuring spread through the space. Olivia was positioned at the front again, talking animatedly, and people leaned in as if hanging on every word. Her influence in the room was subtle but real, shaping the mood in quiet ways. Each time she spoke, I felt the atmosphere tilt slightly, a shift I could not yet name but knew mattered. I stood quietly for a moment, letting everything settle inside me. The rumors, the whispers, the emails, the stories Olivia had spun. For the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. The way she moved through a room weaving tiny threads that together formed a picture she wanted others to see. Michael came to stand beside me once more. He did not speak. He simply waited, patient and steady, giving me room to process what was unfolding. As I looked around the crowded hall, the music softened and lights dimmed a little to prepare for the next transition. I felt a change coming, a shift in the night. Something important was preparing to surface, and I sensed that what happened next would expose more than Olivia intended. The room grew quiet again. A subtle tension rose beneath the elegant setting, a tension I felt deep in my bones. I knew without understanding why that the evening had reached a turning point. Whatever Olivia had set in motion was no longer hers to control. A quiet tremor ran through me as I stepped away from the center of the room, the weight of the evening pressing in from every direction. I felt the tension like a thin crack beneath my feet, widening with each whisper and sideways glance. Michael stayed close, watching the room with a focus that told me he was piecing things together faster than I was. I sensed something gathering behind his calm expression, something he had been preparing for. A moment later, Ethan approached with a look that was sharper than before. He asked if he could speak with Michael privately. The two stepped a few paces away, far enough that I could not hear their words but close enough that I saw the shift in Michael's posture as Ethan showed him something on his phone. Michael nodded once, then again, slower this time. When he returned to me, his jaw was set. "We need to talk to Avery again," he said quietly. "There is more happening than emails." His voice was steady, but there was a controlled urgency beneath it. Before I could respond, Avery appeared at the edge of the corridor and motioned for us to follow her. She led us through a side door into a small service hallway where voices from the banquet room faded into a distant hum. Her face was tense, the kind of tension that comes from holding something too important to say out loud in front of others. I asked what was going on. She took a slow breath, then said she had pulled a complete set of email logs at Michael's request earlier in the evening. The logs showed not just one or two messages, but a series of attempts to disrupt the event. Emails requesting changes to contracts, cancellations of services, even attempts to redirect deliveries. The pattern was clear and deliberate. She said, all of them mimicked my writing style, but not perfectly. The phrasing was slightly off, the sentence rhythm wrong, the timing suspicious. I felt as if something inside me was falling in slow motion. Michael stepped in then. Holding out his phone, he said he had taken the logs to Rebecca, my cousin who practiced family law, to confirm whether what we were seeing could be considered identity misuse. Rebecca had looked them over briefly and said that if someone was impersonating me to modify legal agreements, it might cross into territory no one wanted to be in. I stared at the screen. There was my name, my email signature, my supposed requests. I felt a wave of something cold wash over my arms. Avery hesitated, then said softly that all the messages came from a single network, the Carter family home. She added that the timing of the emails lined up with mornings when my parents were at work and evenings when Olivia had been visiting. She said she could not confirm who sent them, but the consistency was undeniable. I closed my eyes. For a heartbeat, I could almost pretend none of it was real. But then I remembered the change in Olivia's tone earlier, the confidence in her smile, the way she watched me from across the room like someone who believed she had control of the narrative. When I opened my eyes again, Michael stepped closer and said he had known something was wrong weeks ago. He had been trying to trace the pattern quietly, so he would have answers before confronting anyone. He looked frustrated with himself for not bringing it to me sooner, but he explained that he did not want to alarm me without evidence. I tried to speak, but a lump tightened in my throat. The pieces were falling together faster than I could hold them. Avery added that there was something else. She had checked the security footage from her office where she met with Michael the week before. The footage showed Olivia entering the building, speaking briefly with the receptionist, and walking toward Avery's office before being turned away. Olivia had asked if she could discuss the wedding and had insisted she had permission to review the contract. The receptionist had not believed her. I felt my breath catch. Michael took my hand gently and said he had suspected Olivia from the moment he heard about the first cancellation. Tonight had only confirmed it. Ethan had also noticed Olivia sending messages to guests and had taken screenshots that matched some of the rumors spreading around the room. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady the pounding beneath my ribs. How long had Olivia been planning this? How much had she told others? How much had she wanted this evening to fall apart? Avery apologized for the distress and stepped away to give us privacy. As soon as she disappeared down the hall, I felt my legs shake and leaned against the wall. Michael stayed beside me, silent for a moment. His voice was low when he spoke. You have been carrying so much without even knowing the half of it. You deserve better than this. He paused, and we are not going to let tonight become the story she wants it to be. I stared at him, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. A small part of me felt vindicated that I had not imagined the strange inconsistencies of the last few weeks. But another part felt like something inside me was slowly breaking. Not from shock, but from recognition. I knew my sister could be manipulative. I had seen her twist stories since we were children. But this was different. This was calculated. Michael asked if I wanted to sit for a moment. I shook my head. If I sat, I might never get back up. We walked back toward the hall. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses grew louder as we approached the doors. The contrast between the quiet in the hallway and the energy inside the banquet room made everything feel unreal, as if I were watching my own life from a distance. As we stepped into the room, I caught sight of Olivia again. She stood near the stage, speaking with a group of relatives, her face lit with interest as she gestured gracefully, weaving some story that held their attention captive. Daniel stood nearby, but his expression had changed since earlier. There was a tension in his jaw, a subtle distance in his posture. Olivia saw me in the doorway, and her smile sharpened just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But I saw it. She lifted her chin as though daring me to challenge the version of events she had crafted so carefully. In that moment, Something inside me steadied. The confusion and fear that had filled my chest began to shift into something clearer, firmer. A quiet resolve formed beneath the surface of my panic. Michael looked at me with a question in his eyes, but he did not speak. Across the room, Olivia continued her conversation, confident and radiant. She looked like someone who believed she held every piece of the puzzle, but Michael and I now held pieces she did not know we had, and the evening was far from over. The guests were settling again, drawn toward the stage as the host announced the next portion of the evening. A soft hum spread across the room, the kind that comes right before people expect something heartfelt or celebratory. I felt none of that. I felt only the weight of what Michael and I now knew, and the cold certainty that Olivia was not finished. She stepped forward before anyone could call her name. It was subtle enough that someone unfamiliar with her might think it was a spontaneous offer, but I knew better. Olivia never did anything without a reason. She reached the microphone with that smooth, unhurried walk she used whenever she wanted to claim a space as her own. Her smile glowed beneath the lights. "Thank you all for being here tonight." She spoke with warmth wrapped in silk. "This has been such a beautiful evening for our family." She paused, letting the moment land, and I think it is the perfect time to share something about my sister. A slow dread tightened low in my stomach. I felt Michael shift beside me, ready. Olivia let out an airy laugh. "As many of you know, weddings can bring out stress in anyone." She glanced at me with feigned tenderness, and Emily has always felt things very deeply. She tries so hard to get everything right, but sometimes that can be a lot. A few guests murmured sympathetically. Olivia steadied herself on the microphone stand, her eyes shining with carefully crafted sincerity. There were moments in the last few weeks when things got overwhelming for her. She changed her mind about the floral arrangements, switched the decorator twice, even asked the planner to redo the schedule. Her voice softened like she was confiding a private pain. I know that comes from a place of love and wanting things to be perfect, and we all support her through it. The murmuring grew louder. A few people nodded toward me, their faces warm with concern for the troubled bride I had suddenly become in Olivia's story. I stood motionless, my hands cold. The lies slid so easily off her tongue. She had polished them, practiced them, relished them. She continued, saying that wedding planning sometimes brings out insecurities. She hinted that I had been emotional, unpredictable. She painted me as fragile, hard to manage, grateful that Michael was patient enough to handle it. Michael leaned in just slightly, his voice low enough for only me. "This stops now." Olivia finished her little speech with a sweet smile, and the room applauded. Not loudly, but enough to twist something inside me. People clapped because they believed she had said something touching, something generous. They saw her as a caring sister who had stepped up to support a struggling bride. She stepped down from the stage and moved toward our parents. Linda reached for her hand, pride softening her features. Robert looked troubled but said nothing. I could not move for a moment. The applause faded, but the echo of her words clung to me like a film I could not wash away. I felt exposed in a way I had no control over, as if the room had been invited to pity me. Michael touched my elbow gently. "Come with me." We walked toward a quieter section of the hall. My heart thudded hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I opened my mouth, but no sound came at first. When I finally managed to speak, it came out barely above a whisper. "She is rewriting me right in front of everyone." Michael nodded once, and she thinks she got away with it. Before I could reply, a couple approached us. They offered soft smiles and asked if I was doing better. One asked if I needed help coordinating the planner. Another said she hoped the confusion earlier had not added too much stress. Their tone held real kindness, but it was built entirely on Olivia's fabrication. After they walked away, Michael exhaled slowly. "She is not just trying to embarrass you, she is trying to make you look unstable." I felt something hot rise in my chest, an anger threaded with years of old wounds. I had spent so long avoiding conflict with Olivia that seeing her escalate like this left me shaken. It was no longer jealousy or rivalry. This was strategy. As we moved away from the crowd, I noticed Daniel standing near the bar. He looked strained, his posture tight. When he saw me, he walked over immediately. "Is everything all right?" He looked genuinely worried. "Olivia said the planner had been difficult, that you were dealing with too much pressure. I do not want to assume anything, but none of this feels right tonight." I held his gaze, Daniel, I have not changed a single decision in weeks. The planner is not the problem. And neither is the stress. Something flickered in his eyes, a realization he did not want but could not ignore. Before he could speak again, Olivia appeared at his side with a bright smile that did not touch her eyes. There you two are? She wove her arm through his. I was wondering where you disappeared to. Her gaze cut to me for the briefest moment. Sharp enough to skim bone, she looked like someone smoothing the surface of water that hid something deeper. Daniel glanced between us, his confusion deepening, but Olivia guided him away before he could ask anything else. I thought I might feel relief when she stepped back into the crowd. Instead, I felt the room shift again, the way a storm cloud shifts before releasing rain. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. It is time. I looked at him, unsure what he meant. He nodded toward the stage. The host was preparing to invite someone to speak again. The lights dimmed slightly. The music softened. Michael kept his voice quiet. I am not letting her control another second of this night. And I am not letting you stand here alone while she rewrites reality. My breath caught. Michael had been patient all evening, biding time, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. Now he was done waiting. I felt a mixture of fear and relief settle in my chest. Whatever came next would change the night entirely. And part of me finally welcomed that. The host began to step forward, cueing for the next person to speak. Michael moved his hand from my shoulder to my hand, steady and warm. He looked toward the stage with a stillness that told me he had made up his mind. This was the moment Olivia had been building toward, believing she held control of the narrative. But Michael had chosen his moment too, and I had no doubt his would land harder. I breathed in slowly, bracing myself as the room quieted around us, every gaze turning toward the front, unaware that the night was about to shift in a way no one, especially Olivia, saw coming. Michael stepped forward just as the room settled into its expectant quiet. His movement was steady and deliberate, cutting through the soft glow of light like a man who had already made peace with whatever storm he was about to walk into. I felt my breath catch as he released my hand and made his way toward the stage. The host looked surprised when Michael reached him, but Michael spoke quietly, calmly, and whatever he said was enough. The host stepped aside. Michael took the microphone with a composure that sent a ripple of curiosity across the room. The guests turned in their seats. Even the servers paused where they stood. I felt the air tighten. Michael glanced toward me only once, a brief flash of reassurance, before he addressed the room. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to take a moment to clarify something before we move forward with the rest of the evening. A low hum moved through the crowd. People leaned in instinctively, picking up the seriousness in his tone. Michael continued. There have been some misunderstandings tonight about changes to the event, requests for cancellations and modifications. My heartbeat surged. I could feel it in my palms, in my throat, in the sudden stillness around me. Michael paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He held the room without force, only truth. These were not mistakes, and they did not come from Emily. A collective hush swept across the hall. Olivia stiffened in her chair. She tried to maintain her serene smile, but her fingers curled tightly around the stem of her champagne flute. Michael lifted his phone. A screen lit up behind him as Avery signaled the AV tech. The first image appeared. An email thread requesting cancellation of the floral contract, written in a style meant to mimic mine. The next image showed metadata, the sender's location. Michael spoke evenly. These messages were sent using an email that looks like Emily's, but it was not hers. Every one of them was sent from the Carter residence in Cleveland. Murmurs began to rise. Confusion, concern, shock. Olivia's face drained of color. Michael continued before anyone could respond. Emily has been blamed for inconsistencies that she had nothing to do with. In truth, someone impersonated her to sabotage this evening. The planner, the florist, the decorator, even the lighting company. All of them received false instructions. Linda pressed a hand against her chest. Robert leaned forward, his face troubled. Michael went on, and that is only part of it. The screen changed again. This time it showed timestamped security footage from Avery's office building. Olivia walking inside, speaking to the receptionist, attempting to access the wedding contracts. A few guests gasped softly. Olivia stood abruptly. Her voice shook. That is taken out of context. I was asking a simple question. I did not do anything wrong. Michael did not respond to her. He simply advanced the next image. Text messages. The ones Ethan had captured earlier. Olivia spreading rumors about me to guests. Twisting stories, preparing the narrative. Olivia looked around wildly, her composure cracking. She shook her head as if trying to dislodge the evidence itself. That is private. You should not be showing that. You do not understand what was happening. Harper stepped forward from the crowd, her posture tense but steady. She cleared her throat. I work with Olivia at Horizon Pharma. She has been talking about Emily for weeks, spreading things that did not feel right. She told several of us that Emily was unstable, that she was sabotaging her own event, that she was impossible to work with. None of it matched what I saw when Emily visited the office with Michael. The murmurs grew louder. A few people glanced at Olivia with disbelief. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Olivia turned sharply toward Harper, her voice rising. You have no idea what you are talking about. But her denial was thin, unraveling fast. Michael's voice remained firm but calm. Olivia, you tried to destroy Emily's credibility tonight. You tried to humiliate her in front of our families and friends. But you left a trail behind you. Olivia's breathing quickened. She seemed to shrink and harden at the same time, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for someone to side with her. Her gaze landed on Linda. Mom, tell them I would never do something like this. Linda looked torn, pain etched across every line of her face. She glanced at the evidence again, then at me, then at Olivia. Her voice trembled. I do not know what to say. Olivia stared at her, stunned. Daniel rose from his chair slowly. For the first time that night, he spoke with clarity. Olivia, I asked you earlier if things were true. You brushed it off. Now I am standing here, looking at proof. I do not recognize the person I am seeing. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes glossed with panic. Michael continued, Everything we have shown is verified. But there is one more piece. The room fell silent. The screen changed again. A final file. A compilation of timestamps showing that the emails had been sent during windows of time, when no one else was home. Times that matched Olivia's visits to the Carter residence. The pattern was unmistakable. Olivia took a step back, her face contorting. This is twisted. You are twisting everything. I was trying to help. I was trying to fix her mistakes. She is the one who makes everything harder. Her voice cracked on the last word. It echoed through the hall with a rawness that made everything sharper. Michael set the microphone down gently, but his voice reached the entire room anyway. No one asked you to fix anything, and nothing needed fixing. The hall felt impossibly still. I felt myself take a slow breath. The first real one in what felt like hours. The truth was not gentle, but it was here, visible, irreversible. Olivia looked around the room again, searching for an ally, a lifeline, but every face showed the same thing: shock, disappointment, betrayal. She stumbled slightly as she backed away from the center of attention she had once commanded so easily. And then, without warning, her expression shifted. The panic in her eyes deepened into something darker. People do not know what she is like, Olivia said, pointing toward me with a trembling hand. You do not know how perfect she always had to be, how everything revolved around her. I am the one who had to fight for anything. No one spoke. Her words hung limp in the air. Olivia's voice cracked again. If she had struggled even once, maybe I would not have had to work so hard just to be seen. I felt something break quietly inside me, not out of sympathy, not even out of shock, but out of the clarity that nothing she said now could undo the truth. Daniel stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. Olivia, stop. She froze, her eyes wide on him. He looked at her with a kind of finality that filled the space between them. Whatever this is, whatever story you have told yourself, it ends now. Olivia's breath caught. The room held its breath with her. Michael reached for my hand again, grounding me. I felt the warmth of his touch spread through me in a slow, steady current. And just as I exhaled, the lights shimmered softly above us. The sound of someone shifting in their seat echoed louder than it should have. And the night stood suspended at its breaking point, waiting for what would come next. The silence pressed in on all of us until it felt like the air itself had thinned. My heart thudded once, slow and heavy, then again. Olivia stood frozen in the center of the attention she had once craved, her fingers trembling at her sides as if she no longer knew what to hold on to. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for something familiar, something safe. But nothing met her there. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, her lips parted, and for a moment she seemed unable to form a sound. Then her voice came out thin and cracked. You have no idea what it was like growing up with her. A soft murmur rose in the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, unsure whether this was another performance or something real. She swallowed hard and tried again. Everyone thought she was perfect. Emily never needed anything. She never asked for anything. She just did everything right. I was the one who had to work twice as hard just to be noticed. The words hit something inside me. Not sharp but strange. A reflection I had never been allowed to see. Olivia continued speaking, her voice picking up desperation. Mom always said Emily had it together. Dad said she was the easy one. Teachers liked her. Relatives bragged about her. And no one looked at me unless I made them. Linda let out a small cry, covering her mouth. Robert stayed seated, but I saw something shift in his expression. A painful recognition. Like a memory he had tried for years not to revisit. Olivia kept going, faster now, as if something inside her had cracked open. Do you know what it feels like to watch your sister glide through life while you stumble in every shadow she leaves behind? Do you know what it feels like to be told you need to try harder when she barely tries at all? I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not anger, not yet. Something else. A flicker of sorrow for the girl she must have been. The one who never said these things aloud. But the room was not a safe place for confessions. Not now, not here. Olivia pressed a hand to her temple, her breath uneven. When Emily got engaged first, everyone fussed over her. Everyone said how proud they were. Even Mom talked about how lucky she was. I could not stand it. I knew if she got married before me, it would be over. I would be the failure in the family. Linda gasped. Olivia, no. Olivia's voice cracked louder. I could not let her take that from me. A long, painful pause followed. The kind that makes people hold their breath because the truth has suddenly become too heavy to ignore. I stared at her, rooted in place. My chest tightened, not from shock, but from something far deeper, something that had been waiting years to surface. I had known Olivia envied me. I had known she twisted stories. But I had never understood how deep her fear ran, and how much it had cost me. Daniel stepped closer to her, his voice calm but strained. You hurt people, Olivia. You hurt Emily. You hurt me. And for what? Some idea you built in your head about what you needed to be. She spun toward him, eyes wild. I was trying to protect myself. You do not know what it is like to feel like you are always behind. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not have to. You were not behind. You were loved. You were supported, but you did not know how to see it. Olivia shook her head violently, tears streaking down her face. This was supposed to be my moment. Mine, not hers. She is not better than me. She never was. Her voice rose enough that a few guests flinched. She looked back at me then, her expression contorted with a mixture of anguish and fury. Do you know what it was like watching you get everything I wanted? Watching people admire you, believe you, trust you. My voice felt caught in my throat, but I managed to speak softly. I did not take anything from you, Olivia. Her face twisted. You did not have to. You just had to exist. Something inside me fractured at those words. All those years of strained smiles and tiptoeing around her moods suddenly made sense in a way that made my stomach turn. She had not simply envied me. She had built her entire sense of worth against me. Olivia lifted her hands as if to defend herself from a truth she could no longer escape. When you got engaged, I panicked. I had to do something. I had to slow things down. I had to make people question you so I could catch up. That is why I sent those emails. That is why I talked to the planner and the decorator. That is why I said what I said. The room erupted in small gasps. She sobbed once, sharp and broken. I thought if I could keep you from getting married first, maybe everything would stay balanced. Maybe I would not feel like the nothing I always feel around you. Michael took a step forward as if to stand between us, but I touched his arm. I needed to hear her. Even if it hurt, Olivia wiped at her face aggressively. I did not want to destroy your night. I just wanted to feel like I mattered for once. Linda reached toward her, tears streaming. Sweetheart, we never meant to make you feel less than your sister. Olivia jerked away. Yes, you did. The rawness in her voice sliced through the room. Robert finally spoke. Olivia, we loved you just as much. We tried to give you everything. She let out a bitter laugh. You gave Emily silence and called it strength. You gave me attention because you thought I needed fixing. Neither of you saw what that did. Her knees seemed to weaken, and she steadied herself on the back of a chair. The adrenaline that kept her standing was fading. Harper stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Olivia, jealousy does not excuse hurting people. You crossed lines that cannot be brushed away. Olivia closed her eyes like she could not bear the weight of another voice. Daniel looked at her one last time. I cannot follow you into this. I cannot stand beside someone who lies like this. He swallowed hard. I need space, a lot of it. She looked stricken. Daniel, please, do not leave me. You are all I have left. He hesitated for a long moment. Pain etched into every line of his face, then stepped back. The sound Olivia made was barely audible, a small, wounded cry. She reached for him, but her hand fell short. The room remained silent. Everyone watched her with the stunned stillness of people witnessing something heavy and human and tragic unfold in real time. I felt my own breath unsteady. My pulse thudded in the hollow of my throat. Olivia finally sank into a nearby chair, unable to hold herself upright. Her sobs were no longer sharp or controlled. They came from someplace older, deeper. A place she had guarded so fiercely she had turned it into cruelty to survive. Michael's hand found mine again. His fingers squeezed gently as the realization settled over me. The truth had come out, all of it. And nothing that came next would ever return our family to what it had been before. Guests sat motionless. Some whispered. Others looked away. A few looked toward me with a mixture of sympathy and shock. Somewhere behind the wall of noise in my head, I heard the distant click of someone shifting their chair and the faint echo of a server placing a tray on a table. Small sounds cutting through the heavy quiet. I watched Olivia bury her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, the shards of her carefully built world falling around her, and for the first time that night, the weight of everything settled into one clear, steady truth. There was no going back. The sound of Olivia's sobs faded into the background as the room slowly awakened from its stunned stillness. People shifted in their chairs, murmuring softly, unsure whether to comfort her or keep their distance. A few relatives stood, hesitated, then sat again. The atmosphere felt fragile, like one wrong movement might cause it to splinter even further. I stayed where I was, my hands still wrapped in Michael's. My pulse had finally begun to steady, though the weight in my chest remained. I could not move toward Olivia, not yet. There was too much between us, too much that had been exposed, too much that still ached. The host cleared his throat quietly, an instinctive attempt to regain order, but no guideline existed for an evening like this. He whispered something to the event staff, and they slipped away. Dimming the lights just a touch and lowering the music to a soft hum, it helped. People seemed grateful for something gentle to anchor them. Linda stood slowly, her hands trembling. She took a half step toward Olivia, but stopped when her daughter flinched at her movement. Linda pressed both hands to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. I watched her struggle between maternal instinct and the reality that Olivia had created this moment herself. My father remained seated, staring at the floor, as if the unraveling of everything he knew about his daughters weighed too heavily to lift his gaze. I felt something tugging inside me. A small part of me wanted to go to Olivia, to reach for her the way I had when we were children and she cried over something small. But the memory of everything she admitted, the months of sabotage, the years of quiet cruelty, held me in place. Michael leaned closer. You do not owe her anything right now. His voice was gentle but firm. Let yourself breathe. I nodded, though breathing felt like something I had to relearn. A few guests approached carefully, offering soft condolences not for a death, but for something broken. One aunt touched my arm lightly and whispered that she was so sorry for everything I had endured. Another relative apologized for believing the rumors. Their voices blurred together, not because their words did not matter, but because I was too full to absorb anything more. When they finally drifted back to their seats, I turned to step away from the center of the room. I needed space. I needed air that had not been touched by the shock, still hanging thickly over everyone. I walked toward a small alcove near the side doors. The cool draft from outside brushed against my skin, and I closed my eyes for a moment. letting the air settle my heartbeat. For the first time since the evening began, I felt my body relax enough to release a long breath. It felt like stepping out of a storm. After a moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Michael joined me without speaking, his presence a quiet shelter. He waited until I opened my eyes before he asked if I wanted to sit. I shook my head. I was afraid if I sat, I would feel the full weight of everything at once. Through the open doorway, I could still see Olivia. She had stopped crying hard, but her shoulders hunched inward. Harper stood a few steps away, murmuring softly with another coworker. Daniel was nowhere near her. The empty space at her side was louder than any confrontation could have been. Linda knelt beside Olivia now, speaking to her in a low voice. Even from a distance, I could see how desperately she wanted to fix what was broken. Olivia did not push her away this time, but her body stayed tense. Robert finally lifted his gaze. Watching the two of them with an expression that looked shattered, I turned my eyes away, watching them hurt in a different way. The kind that reminded me family pain never stayed in one person. It spread. It lived in quiet corners and heavy silences. It resurfaced in moments like this when truth came too late. Rebecca approached Michael and me then. She had always been steady, even in emotional chaos, and tonight was no exception. She asked if she could speak with us privately for a minute. Michael guided me into a quieter corner, and Rebecca spoke softly. She explained the possible consequences of Olivia's actions, the impersonation, the contract interference, the deliberate sabotage. Each charge carried potential weight if a company decided to escalate it. She assured me that no one expected me to pursue anything, but she wanted me to understand that what had been done was not harmless jealousy. It was a breach that could have had legal implications. Her tone remained calm and reassuring, but the words left me chilled. I thanked her and she squeezed my hand gently before returning to her table. A little while later, Harper approached me with hesitation. She apologized for not recognizing sooner that Olivia's behavior stemmed from deeper issues. She explained that when Olivia first mentioned me at work, it sounded like casual sister stuff. But over time, her comments grew darker. Harper seemed relieved that the truth was out, but saddened that it happened this way. I thanked her too. It mattered that she came forward. When she stepped away, I finally allowed myself to rest my back against the cool wall. The room felt quieter now, calmer. Conversation softened as people processed what had unfolded. The servers began circulating again, offering drinks hesitantly, unsure whether to speak above a whisper. Michael stood beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, offering warmth without pressure. He glanced down at me. "Are you holding up?" I nodded slowly. "I do not know what I am feeling yet, but I am not falling apart." He gave a faint smile. "You do not have to be strong right now." "Maybe not," I said softly, "but I am done being silent." I looked out over the room again, taking in the faces of friends, family, co-workers, people who had come to celebrate with us and witness something far different. And as painful as it all was, I felt something settle inside me, something like gravity finally choosing where to rest. The truth had not broken me the way Olivia hoped. It had broken the illusion she lived in. The roles we had played since childhood had rattled apart, and for the first time I felt the space to become someone new. People began drifting back into conversations. A few gentle laughs surfaced, tentative but hopeful. The staff lifted the lights slightly, easing the room toward normalcy. It was not the evening anyone expected, but it was beginning to move forward. Across the hall, Olivia stood. She wiped her face, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Daniel had reappeared near the entrance, watching her without approaching. His expression held sorrow, but also distance. A decision was taking shape in him. Olivia took a shaky step toward him, but he lifted a hand, stopping her. "Not now," he said quietly. His voice carried just enough to reach me. "We will talk, but not tonight." Olivia froze, her shoulders curling inward again. She lowered her eyes and stepped back, defeated. I watched for a moment longer, then turned away. I needed to regain my footing in the world that was rebuilding itself around me. Michael touched my hand again, ready to go back in. I nodded. It was time to move, even if I did not yet know where each step would lead. We walked toward the far side of the room where the lights were warmest, and the music had begun to lift ever so slightly. The night was not over, not technically, but it no longer belonged to Olivia's chaos. For the first time since this began, I felt the faintest possibility of calm settling in the air, a quiet pause between what had happened and whatever would come next. Guests began drifting back into small clusters, conversations picking up in cautious tones, as if everyone was relearning how to speak in the wake of everything that had unfolded. The music softened into a calm instrumental piece, and someone on the staff quietly added a few more lights near the dessert table. It was an attempt to restore a sense of normal evening flow, but nothing would ever feel quite the same. Not after tonight. Michael and I walked side by side with slow, measured steps. I felt the warmth of his hand lingering near mine, not quite holding it, letting me decide when to reach for him. I appreciated that small grace more than he knew. I scanned the room out of habit, expecting at any moment to feel the old tension pull me tight again, but instead there was an unfamiliar quiet in me, a settling. The kind that comes when something long buried is finally unearthed and laid bare in the light. Olivia had retreated to a corner near the far wall. She sat with her elbows resting on her knees, her gaze fixed on the floor. No one approached her now, not because they wished her harm, but because they understood instinctively that she needed space to face her own reflection. Linda stayed near her, hesitant to move closer, unsure whether comfort would heal or only deepen the wound. Robert stood a little apart from them, his face etched with regret. Families seldom break cleanly. The cracks run in every direction, even toward the ones who tried their best but did not know how to see what needed seeing. I looked away and let my breath steady itself. The ache in me softened. I realized I was no longer waiting for someone to fix anything. I was no longer holding my breath for an apology or a resolution that felt neatly packaged. Not everything resolves cleanly. Some things must simply be acknowledged and then carried differently. Michael guided me gently toward a quieter room just off the main hall. It was decorated with winter greenery and soft candles, meant for guests to take photos earlier in the evening. Now it was empty and calm, the perfect place to gather my thoughts. He closed the door partway behind us. "How are you really?" he asked. His tone held no expectation, only sincerity. I leaned against the table behind me and let the weight of the day settle through me. I feel like everything I thought I understood about my family is shifting at once. But I'm not broken, and I'm not afraid. Michael stepped closer. "You should not have had to go through any of this." I reached for his hand then, finally taking it into mine. We did go through it, and we are still here. A soft smile touched his face, warm and grounding. The moment lingered, simple and steady, before he spoke again. "We can still salvage the night if you want. Spend time with the people who love you. Make this evening ours again." I nodded. The idea felt comforting rather than exhausting. Yes, I think I want that. We stayed in the quiet room a moment longer. I let myself breathe fully, deeper than I had all night. When I opened the door again, the shift inside me was subtle but real. I was walking back into the world not as someone wounded or exposed, but as someone who knew herself more clearly than she had that morning. Michael and I returned to the main hall, and a few guests greeted us with genuine warmth. Their smiles no longer held pity. They held understanding, support, even admiration. It was strange and humbling, and for the first time that evening, I felt the beginnings of joy unfurl in me again. A cousin raised a glass to us with a gentle nod. A family friend hugged me when I least expected it, whispering that she was proud of how I carried myself. Several people apologized for believing things that never should have been believed in the first place. I accepted their words with grace. I did not feel the old need to shrink or smooth anything over. The responsibility for those misunderstandings no longer lived with me. As the evening eased forward, the staff began resetting some of the tables to make the room feel more open. The music grew brighter and a few people even danced, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. The night did not mimic joy, but it found pieces of it again, scattered but sincere. I stepped aside to adjust a small floral arrangement on the corner of a table when Linda approached slowly. "Emily," she said softly. Her voice shook. "I am so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I turned toward her. There was no anger left in me, only a tired kind of clarity. "I know, Mom, but we have a lot to untangle." Tears welled in her eyes. I nodded gently, letting her know I was not shutting her out. I was simply shifting the boundaries that had been too blurred for too long. We would talk, but not tonight. Linda wiped her eyes and returned to where Robert stood, looping her arm through his. They looked older in that moment, not in years, but in spirit, like people who had just realized how much they had overlooked. Later in the evening, I walked out briefly onto the patio. Cold winter air brushed against my skin, crisp and clean. Michael joined me a moment later, wrapping his coat lightly around my shoulders. The warmth of it seeped in. He looked at me with quiet affection. "You are stronger than you think you are." I let my gaze rest on the snow drifting under the lights. Maybe I am just finally done carrying things that were never mine. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the party behind us. Then I turned and rested my head lightly against his shoulder. The world felt steadier when he was near. After a while, we went back inside. The night had softened. People were smiling again, gathering around the dessert table, taking photos, reconnecting with the purpose of the evening. It was not perfect, but it was real. Before the night ended, several relatives approached to ask how they could support me and Michael. The sincerity in their voices warmed something inside me. I realized then that the love we had chosen to celebrate tonight had not been overshadowed at all. It had steadied us through the worst of it. Weeks later, life began settling into its new shape. Olivia moved into a small apartment closer to downtown. Daniel and she took time apart. Her company began a review of her conduct. My parents encouraged her to seek counseling. She did not reach out to me, and I did not expect her to. Healing would come in its own way for her, if she allowed it. I no longer needed to stand in the middle of her storm. Michael and I resumed planning our wedding with lightness this time. No frantic calls from vendors, no strange cancellations, just two people choosing one another in the quiet, uncomplicated way love should feel. Sometimes family fractures, sometimes it mends. Sometimes it simply shifts until it finds a shape that no longer hurts. And sometimes peace comes not from winning or losing, but from stepping out of a role that never fit. As for me, I learned something I should have known long ago. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to be seen. I am allowed to walk away from what wounds me and walk toward what steadies me. If you stayed with me through this journey, I hope you will join me for the next story. Share your thoughts, subscribe for more, and stay close. There are many more chapters to tell, and I would love to have you here for all of them.